The old farmhouse creaked in the winter wind, its weathered boards holding memories of 5 generations of the Sullivan family. I stood in the kitchen, running my fingers along the worn countertop where my grandmother had taught me to bake her famous apple pies. The house still smelled like cinnamon and coffee, as if Grandma Rose might walk in any minute with her checkered apron and knowing smile. But Grandma Rose was gone, passing quietly in her sleep 2 weeks ago at the age of 92. I'm Hannah Sullivan, 28, the youngest grandchild and apparently the only one who saw value in this 200-acre farm beyond its potential sale price. Honestly, Hannah, I don't know what you're going to do with this place, my sister Rachel said, perched uncomfortably on a kitchen chair as if afraid dust might ruin her designer outfit. You can barely keep your apartment plants alive. I ignored her, continuing to sort through Grandma's recipe box. Each handwritten card was a treasure, complete with little notes in the margins. Add extra vanilla, makes everything better. Or, don't tell your grandfather, but a splash of bourbon in the pie crust is our secret. The land's not even good for farming anymore, my brother Marcus chimed in from his spot by the window. Soil's too depleted. You should sell while the market's hot. What they really meant was, why did Grandma Rose leave the farm to me instead of dividing it equally among her 6 grandchildren? The others had gotten cash inheritances, substantial ones, while I got the worthless family farm that had been in the Sullivan family since 1875. The reading of the will a week ago had been tense, to say the least. To my granddaughter Hannah, the lawyer had read, adjusting his glasses, I leave the Sullivan family farm including all 200 acres, the main house and all outbuildings, to be held in her name alone with no obligation to share or sell. The explosion that followed still rang in my ears. That's not fair. Rachel had shrieked. The land alone must be worth millions. Actually, the lawyer interjected, Mrs. Sullivan had the property assessed recently. Given the soil quality and remote location, it's worth significantly less than you might think. That had calmed them somewhat, especially when their own inheritance amounts were read. But I saw the looks they exchanged, the way their eyes narrowed when I accepted the old brass key to the farmhouse. They thought I was crazy to want this place. Maybe I was. But they didn't understand. They hadn't spent every summer here like I had, helping Grandma Rose tend her vegetable garden and collect eggs from the chickens. They hadn't sat on the wraparound porch during thunderstorms, listening to her stories about the generations of Sullivans who had worked this land. They hadn't helped her digitize all the old family photos and documents during my college years, preserving our history while they were all too busy with their own lives to visit. At least let us help you sell it, Marcus offered, trying to sound reasonable. I know some developers who might be interested. They're always looking for large parcels even if the soil's bad. I'm not selling, I said, closing the recipe box with perhaps more force than necessary. This is home. Home. Rachel laughed. Hannah, you're a graphic designer. You work from home. What do you know about running a farm? I know enough to try, I replied. And I can learn the rest. The truth was, I had been preparing for this possibility for years, though I never told my family. During those long summers with Grandma Rose, between the baking and the storytelling she had been teaching me about crop rotation and soil management, about the natural springs that fed the property, about the old maps and surveys tucked away in the attic that showed where everything was. Land holds secrets, she used to say, her blue eyes twinkling. You just have to know how to listen. My siblings left eventually, shaking their heads at my stubbornness. I spent that first night alone in the farmhouse, wrapped in one of Grandma's quilts, listening to the wind and remembering the last conversation I had with her, just days before she passed. The others won't understand at first, she had said, her voice weak but her mind still sharp as ever. They see the surface, the worn buildings, the tired soil. But you, my dear girl, you see with your heart. She had pressed an old leather journal into my hands. When the time is right, this will help you understand. Promise me you'll wait until you're alone to read it. I had promised, tucking the journal away until now. Sitting in her favorite armchair by the fireplace, I opened it carefully. Inside, in her familiar handwriting, was a story I had never heard before. My dearest Hannah, by now the will has been read, and you know that the farm is yours. What you don't know, what none of the family knows, is why this land is so much more valuable than it appears. The journal told an incredible tale. In 1875, my great-great-grandfather Patrick Sullivan hadn't chosen this land at random. He had information passed down through generations of his Irish family about reading the land for what lay beneath. He chose this particular plot because of subtle signs that suggested mineral wealth deep underground. But the technology didn't exist then to reach it, Grandma Rose had written. And as the years passed, the family forgot why Patrick had been so insistent on this exact piece of land. They just knew it was ours and that it must be protected. My hands shook as I turned the pages. Grandma had included survey maps, geological reports she had secretly commissioned, and correspondence with experts who had helped her confirm what Patrick Sullivan had suspected all those years ago. The oil companies have been sniffing around for years, she wrote. I've turned them all away waiting for the right time, the right person. You, Hannah, with your combination of respect for our history and modern business sense, are that person. The next morning I made some calls. Within a week, I had meetings scheduled with geological survey teams and environmental impact assessors. I also hired a lawyer, not the family lawyer, but someone recommended by a friend who specialized in mineral rights and land contracts. I kept everything quiet, refusing to answer my siblings' increasingly nosy questions about my plans for the farm. But word gets around in small towns, and when people started seeing survey trucks on the property, the rumors began to fly. It all came to a head at a family dinner at my parents' house, 1 month after I'd inherited the farm. I hadn't wanted to go, but Mom had insisted, saying the family needed to clear the air. I should have known it was an ambush. So, Dad said as soon as we sat down, I hear you've had some interesting visitors out at the farm. Just doing my due diligence, I replied, focusing on buttering my roll. Due diligence? Rachel's voice dripped with sarcasm. Is that what you call secretly meeting with oil companies? I looked up, meeting her accusing stare. How did you dash? Small town, Marcus cut in. Pete down at the diner saw the trucks. Said they were from Western Oil and Gas. Which means, Rachel continued, you've known all along that the farm was valuable. That's why you wouldn't sell, isn't it? You've been playing us for fools. Playing you for fools? I set down my fork, anger rising. Like you played Grandma Rose for a fool all these years? When's the last time any of you visited her? When's the last time you showed any interest in the farm beyond what you could get for selling it? That's not fair, Mom protested. We were busy with our own lives, Dash. Too busy to spend time with her, but not too busy to show up with your hands out when she died? The words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't stop. Do you know she kept every birthday card I sent her? She had them in a special box in her dresser. Know how many were from the rest of you? 0. This isn't about birthday cards, Marcus said, his voice hard. This is about you hiding valuable information from the family. That oil belongs to all of us, Dash. No, it doesn't. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. The farm and everything under it belongs to me. Grandma Rose made that very clear in her will. We'll contest it, Rachel threatened. We'll prove she wasn't in her right mind, Dash. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I reached into my bag and pulled out an old iPad, Grandma's iPad, the one I'd helped her learn to use 3 years ago. Before you try anything, you might want to watch this. I pulled up a video and set it on the table. Grandma Rose's face filled the screen, recorded during her last Christmas alive. She looked tired but alert, her blue eyes sharp as ever. If you're watching this, she began, it means Hannah has found it necessary to show you why I made the choices I did. The room fell silent as Grandma Rose's voice filled the air, methodically laying out every visit, every phone call, every interaction she'd had with each family member over the past decade. She had documented everything, the missed birthdays, the rushed holidays, the transparent attempts to curry favor when they thought she might be updating her will. But it was the last part of the video that made them all pale. And if you're thinking of contesting my will, Grandma said, a hint of steel entering her voice, you should know that I've had regular cognitive assessments for the past 5 years, all documented by independent doctors. I've also recorded every conversation where certain family members suggested I should simplify my life by selling the farm to developers they happened to know. Her eyes seemed to stare directly at Marcus and Rachel. Every conversation. The video ended. No one spoke. There's more, I said quietly. 3 years' worth of videos, all safely stored in multiple locations. Grandma Rose was old, not stupid. She knew exactly what she was doing. Why didn't she say anything? Mom whispered, tears in her eyes. If she was so hurt by how we treated her dash. Because she was teaching me, I replied. Teaching me to see people for who they really are, not who they pretend to be when they want something. I gathered my things to leave but paused at the door. I have a meeting with Western Oil tomorrow. Not to sell, to negotiate leasing rights that will protect the land while still allowing controlled extraction. If you'd bothered to talk to Grandma Rose about her life, about our family history, you'd know that protecting the land was always more important than profit. Hannah, wait, Dad called out. Maybe we can work something out, Dash. You're right, I said, my hand on the doorknob. But first I think you all need to watch the rest of Grandma's videos. All of them. Then we'll talk about working things out. I left them there, surrounded by their half-eaten dinner and shattered assumptions. The drive back to the farm was quiet, the late autumn sun setting behind the hills that had belonged to my family for generations. Grandma Rose had been right, land does hold secrets. But the biggest secret she'd left me wasn't about oil or mineral rights. It was the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or acres, but in the choices we make and the legacy we leave behind. I parked in front of the old farmhouse, its windows glowing warmly in the gathering dusk. There was so much work ahead, surveys to complete, contracts to negotiate, decisions to make. But for now I just sat there, listening to the evening sounds of the farm and smiling as I imagined Grandma Rose's voice. Sometimes, dear heart, the best revenge is simply proving them wrong. Part 2. The meeting with Western Oil went exactly as Grandma Rose had predicted in her journal. They tried to lowball me at first, thinking I was just some naive young woman who didn't understand the value of what she had. Their surprise when I countered with specific terms about environmental protections and sustainable extraction methods was almost comical. Miss Sullivan, the lead negotiator said, adjusting his tie nervously, these are unusually detailed requirements for someone who just inherited the property. I smiled, thinking of the thick folder of research Grandma had left me. My grandmother spent 30 years preparing for this moment, sir. I suggest you take her requirements seriously. The preliminary tests confirmed everything the secret geological surveys had suggested. The Sullivan Farm sat on top of one of the largest oil deposits in the state. But it wasn't just oil, there were natural gas pockets and rare earth minerals too. Grandma Rose hadn't just protected a farm, she'd safeguarded a fortune. Word spread fast. Suddenly my phone was ringing constantly with calls from concerned family members. Even distant cousins I hadn't seen since childhood were reaching out, asking about investment opportunities. Rachel was the first to try a different approach. She showed up at the farm one morning, looking uncharacteristically humble in jeans and a simple sweater. I brought peace offerings, she said, holding up a box of the Danish pastries I used to love. Can we talk? I let her in, more curious than anything else. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Grandma Rose had served us cookies and milk during those childhood summers Rachel had always been too busy to enjoy. I watched the rest of Grandma's videos, she said quietly, staring into her coffee cup. All of them. I had no idea she felt so alone. You never asked, I replied. None of you did. You did. Rachel looked up, her eyes wet. Every video, every holiday, every random Tuesday, there you were. Listening to her stories, helping with the garden, just being there. It wasn't out of obligation, I said. I genuinely loved spending time with her. I know that now. She wiped her eyes. The way she lit up when you came into the room. I used to think she was playing favorites, but she wasn't. She was responding to the only person who treated her like a human being instead of a walking inheritance. The admission hung between us, heavy with years of unspoken truths. I'm not here to ask for money, Rachel continued. Well, not directly. I want to invest in the farm. Properly, legally, through a business arrangement. I've been doing research on sustainable agriculture, and with the oil revenue we could transform this place into something amazing. I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation. But all I saw was something I'd never seen before. Genuine interest. Why the change of heart? Rachel was quiet for a moment. In one of the videos, Grandma talked about how you used to ask her about every old photo on the walls, every piece of furniture, every family story. She said you understood that wealth isn't just about money, it's about history, connection, belonging. She met my eyes. I want to understand that too. Better late than never, right? It was a start. Marcus took longer to come around. He tried legal threats first, hiring an expensive lawyer to look for loopholes in the will. But Grandma Rose had been thorough. Every document was in order, every decision legally sound. When that failed, he switched to guilt tactics, sending Mom to plead his case. "Your brother's business is struggling," she said during one of her unexpected visits. "Just a small percentage of the oil rights would help him get back on his feet." "Like he helped Grandma when she needed her roof repaired?" I countered. "Oh wait, he was too busy buying his beach house that summer." But something changed when Marcus's wife left him, taking their kids and leaving him alone in that big house he'd worked so hard to afford. He showed up at the farm one rainy evening looking lost. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted, sitting on the porch swing where Grandma used to tell her stories. "I spent so many years chasing money, status, success. And for what? My kids barely know me." I made him Grandma's special hot chocolate, with a splash of bourbon, following her secret recipe. We talked until dawn, really talked for the first time in years. He told me about his fears, his regrets, the pressure he'd put on himself to be the successful eldest grandchild. I shared Grandma's stories about our family's struggles and triumphs, the wisdom she'd passed down that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with values. A week later, Marcus sold his beach house. "I want to invest in something real," he said. "Not just the oil but the farm itself. Help me learn what Grandma tried to teach us." The oil contracts were finalized in spring. The terms were exactly as Grandma Rose had outlined: careful extraction, environmental protections, and a significant portion of the profits dedicated to land conservation and sustainable agriculture. The money was more than any of us had imagined, but that wasn't the real wealth I'd inherited. I used part of the proceeds to restore the farmhouse, keeping its historic character while adding modern amenities. The old barn became a community center where local farmers could share knowledge and resources. The fields that everyone had claimed were worthless now sprouted organic crops, using techniques Grandma Rose had researched and documented in her journals. Rachel moved into the renovated guest house, throwing herself into learning about sustainable farming with the same intensity she used to devote to her corporate career. Marcus started a foundation in Grandma's name, providing scholarships for young people interested in agricultural science and land conservation. 1 year after the will reading, we hosted a family reunion at the farm. Not just the immediate family but cousins, second cousins, aunts and uncles, many of whom hadn't visited in decades. We set up tables on the lawn where Grandma used to host her summer picnics. During the gathering, I played some of the happier videos from Grandma's collection: childhood birthdays, holiday celebrations, quiet moments of family joy she'd captured over the years. There were tears but also laughter and, most importantly, recognition of what we'd almost lost in our blind pursuit of material wealth. "You know what's funny?" Rachel said as we cleaned up afterward. "Everyone thought Grandma left you the farm because you were her favorite. But she left it to you because you were the only one who saw its real value." "The real value isn't in the oil," I replied, thinking of all the lessons hidden in Grandma's journals. "It's in the legacy, the history, the connection to something bigger than ourselves." Marcus joined us, carrying the last of the dishes. "She knew the oil money would get our attention," he said thoughtfully. "But that wasn't the inheritance she really wanted us to claim." He was right. The true inheritance wasn't the oil beneath the soil or the money it generated. It was the wisdom Grandma Rose had tried to share all along, about the importance of family, of stewardship, of understanding that real wealth grows not from what we take, but from what we nurture and protect. We still have our moments of tension, of course. Old habits and hurts don't disappear overnight. But we're learning, growing, trying to be worthy of the legacy Grandma Rose left us. The oil wells pump quietly in their designated areas, but the heart of the farm beats in the restored fields, the community gatherings, the family meals where stories and laughter flow as freely as Grandma's secret recipe cider. Last week I found Rachel's daughter Sophie sitting with one of Grandma's old photo albums, asking questions about every picture, every face, every story captured on those pages. It reminded me so much of myself at her age that my heart ached with joy. "You know," Sophie said, looking up with eyes so like Grandma Rose's, "I think great-grandma was kind of sneaky. She used the oil to teach everybody a lesson about what's really important." Out of the mouths of babes. I sat down beside her, pulling out Grandma's recipe box. The one I now know contains not just recipes, but life lessons carefully encoded in marginalia and seeming coincidences. "Want to learn how to make her apple pie?" I asked. There's a secret ingredient. Sophie's eyes lit up. Does it have something to do with why she left you the farm? I smiled, thinking of all the layers of inheritance Grandma Rose had woven into this place. Some hidden deep underground, others right on the surface for anyone who cared enough to look. Everything here has a secret ingredient, sweetheart. The trick is learning how to see it. As I taught Sophie the proper way to crimp a pie crust, I could almost hear Grandma Rose laughing, that warm, knowing laugh that always meant she was 10 steps ahead of everyone else. She'd known all along that the oil would bring the family back together, but she'd made sure we had to learn the important lessons before we could truly claim our inheritance. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or proving people wrong. Sometimes it's about giving them the chance to prove themselves right, even if it takes a hidden oil well and a grandmother's wisdom to make it happen.